I never thought I'd stand on my own land watching a bulldozer aimed at the cabin I'd just built, while the HOA president screamed that I was destroying community heritage, and a sheriff's cruiser slid in sideways to cut her off dust in the air. My heart in my throat. Contractors diving out of the way like this was some low-budget action movie instead of my real life. But that's exactly where I ended up. And the crazy part is, it all started with what was supposed to be a quiet camping trip. My name's Ethan. I'm in my early 30s, and I've pretty much spent my entire life being the guy who moves out of the way. You know what I mean. The kid who got shoved in the hallway and just laughed it off. The tenant who let landlords lose his maintenance requests. The employee who took on extra work because it was easier than saying no. And after a while, that becomes your whole personality. Stay small. Don't make waves. Don't upset anyone. The one thing I always dreamed about, though, was owning a piece of land that nobody could kick me off of. No landlord, no roommate, no upstairs neighbor blasting Eb at 2 a.m. Just my name on a deed and a place where the air actually smells like trees instead of exhaust. One night I was doom-scrolling real estate listings, and I saw it. 1.5-acre lot at the edge of a place called Cedar Hollow Bluffs backs up to a little creek deed restricted community in small print price low enough that I could just barely make it work if I tightened my budget and stopped pretending I liked going out every weekend. 2 months. A ridiculous amount of paperwork, and one near panic attack at the closing table. Later, I was turning off the main road past a stone sign that said, "Welcome to Cedar Hollow Bluffs, a deed-restricted community," rolling past these perfect little houses with manicured lawns and matching mailboxes, and then finally bumping along this rough gravel track that led to my lot at the far back edge, where the sidewalk just kind of gave up, and the HOA landscaping turned into real trees. My lot sat right on the line between suburb and wild, with a sloping hill down to a creek and a big old maple that looked like it had been there before the neighborhood was even a concept. The very first weekend after closing, my buddies at Tyler and Mason rode out with me, because of course I wanted to celebrate the most grown-up thing I'd ever done by acting like a kid at summer camp. We parked my old camper under the maple, dragged out coolers and camp chairs, set up a couple tents, and for about an hour, it was perfect. The sound of water over rocks, the smell of damp dirt and pine needles, that weird quiet you only get when you're far enough away from traffic that your brain starts to relax. I remember standing there with a beer in my hand, thinking, this is mine. This tiny slice of the world is actually mine. And that feeling was like nothing I'd ever had before. Then we heard her. "Hey, what do you think you're doing down there?" It came from behind us, sharp and high, and packed with this authority that made Tyler mutter, "Uh-oh, boss," fight under his breath. I turned around and saw a woman marching down from the paved part of the neighborhood, sunglasses on, even though the sky was kind of cloudy. Cedar Hollow Bluffs HOA polo shirt, tucked into leggings, clipboard in hand, like a badge. She walked like the grass owed her rent. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to sound friendly. She didn't bother with hello. "You can't camp here," she snapped. "This is community green space. RVs, tents, fires. Absolutely not. Pack it up." I blinked. "This is my lot," I said, kind of half laughing because it felt surreal. I pointed to the realtor sign still stuck near the road with a big red "Sold" sticker on it. "I closed last week. Lot 47B. I've got the deed in my truck if you want to see it." She froze for half a second, then shook her head like I had just told her the sky was green. No, this section has always been part of the natural walking corridor. I know the man who owns this land. He would never sell it to strangers. You're trespassing. As HOA president, I am ordering you to leave. That title, HOA president, she said it like supreme commander. I could feel old Ethan trying to come out the version of me that would stammer and apologize and offer to move. But I also felt Tyler and Mason watching me, and behind them, there was my truck. With all my closing documents sitting in the glove box, and this voice in my head went, "If you back down here on land you literally just bought, you're going to hate yourself forever." So I took a breath. "With respect, ma'am, I said I bought this lot from Mr. Hendricks. County recorded the deed. I'm not trespassing on my own property." She stepped closer, sunglasses right in my face. "I don't care what kind of fake paperwork you printed off the internet," she said. "This area has always been used by the community. You can't just waltz in like some outsider and claim it. If you're not gone in 10 minutes, I'm calling the sheriff." Tyler leaned toward me and whispered, "Did we accidentally buy a portal to HOA hell out loud?" I kept my voice steady. "Call whoever you need to call," I said. "We're not leaving." She kind of gasped, like no one had said no to her in a very long time, spun around and stomped back up the hill, muttering things like criminals, and unbelievable loud enough for us to hear every word. We laughed, but it wasn't that relaxed laugh. From earlier, it was tight, and when I went to bed in the camper that night, every crack of a branch made me think, here we go. This is not over. Sure enough, at 7 a.m., somebody started pounding on the door like they were going to knock it off the hinges. I opened it in sweatpants with pillow hair, and there stood a sheriff's deputy. Hat low expression, exhausted, in that I'm too old for this way. "Morning," he said. "We got a trespassing complaint from the HOA president." My stomach dropped for half a second. Then I grabbed the folder I'd already put by the door, because deep down I had known she was going to do this. I handed over the deed, the purchase contract, even a printout from the county site with my name on the parcel. He took his time flipping through, nodding. "Looks good," he said finally. He turned his head, raised his voice toward the sidewalk up top, where Lydia, that's when I learned her name, Lydia Barnes, was standing with her arms folded so tight her elbows touched. "Ma'am, they own this lot. They're not trespassing." "That has to be forged," she shouted back. "He must have tricked Mr. Hendricks. This land is part of our trail system. My kids grew up walking back there. It's always been community space." The deputy let out a long breath, like he'd had this argument before. "Ma'am, it's in his name on the tax records. You keep filing false reports, and you're the one who's going to have a problem." "All right," then he turned back to me, apologized for the hassle, told me to call if things got weird. When his cruiser pulled away, Lydia stood there for a second shaking, then yelled, "This isn't over," and stomped back to her perfect little cul-de-sac. Outside, I made a joke, tried to shrug it off. Inside, I was rattled. But there was also this little spark of pride, like, hey, for once I didn't just fold because someone was louder than me. That weekend, we tried to salvage the peaceful camping trip vibe, but the mood had shifted. Every time a car slowed on the main road, we looked up like we were being watched. That's the thing about people like Lydia. They don't just mess with your schedule. They get under your skin. The letters started that week. Yellow envelopes from Cedar Hollow Bluffs, HOA, printed in this overly cheerful font. The first one said, "Violation notice," in big, bold letters, then hit me with a $3 fine for unauthorized overnight camping on unimproved lot, damaging community aesthetics. I remember standing in my tiny kitchen holding that paper and saying out loud, damaging aesthetics of what the raccoon trail. But underneath the sarcasm was this old familiar feeling of being in trouble, of having someone in authority pointing a finger at me. Then came another letter, threatening to suspend my access to the neighborhood pool and clubhouse if I continued to use the lot in a non-compliant manner. Then another. At the same time, every time I went out there, some new official truck would show up thanks to Lydia. Animal control came because of an anonymous complaint about illegal trapping. They found shocker zero traps. A game warden came looking for unlicensed hunting, while I was literally sitting in a camp chair holding a fishing rod. Code enforcement showed up to investigate unpermitted structures and found a tent and some camp chairs. Every single one of those guys took one look around, apologized, and dropped some version of, let me guess, HOA president. At first, it was almost funny. Tyler started scratching a tally onto my cooler with a Sharpie Lydia Meltdowns 3. Agencies called 4, but the longer it went on, the less it felt like comedy, and the more it felt like harassment. My chest would tighten every time I turned into the neighborhood, waiting to see who she had called this time. And there was a part of me, that old part, that wanted to just walk away. Sell the lot, call it a loss, because it felt like I had picked a fight I wasn't built for. One Friday night, though, I sat down with the HOA covenants, the bylaws, the county zoning map, all of it spread out on my table like some conspiracy theory wall. And as I read, I got mad. My lot was actually in this weird little gray zone on the map, where the original developer had carved it out for future residential use. And the HOA docs, the ones actually recorded with the county, did not say one word about camping bans on unimproved lots or natural walking corridors. That stuff was buried in a community guidelines PDF on their Facebook page that Lydia and her friends had clearly cooked up later. She'd been weaponizing the idea of the rules, not the actual rules. That same weekend, I met Tom, my neighbor 2 houses up from the main road. Older guy, baseball cap, faded flannel, the kind of man who notices everything, but doesn't say much unless there's a point. He wandered down toward the property line while Lydia was pacing up on the sidewalk pretending she wasn't watching us. "You must be Ethan," he said. "I'm Tom. I was on the first HOA board out here before I had the sense to get off it." We talked for a while, low voice, kind of conspiratorial. Turns out Lydia had been treating that strip behind the houses like her personal nature preserve for years, leading walks, yelling at kids for building forts, chasing off anyone she didn't recognize. She never owned it, never paid taxes on it, but she had convinced herself, and half the block, that it was hers in everything but name. She pushed through a bunch of rules that never made it into the official documents, Tom said. Most folks just went along with it, because, well, it was easier than dealing with her. Sound familiar? I went home that night with a different kind of energy. I was still scared, I won't lie, but I was also tired of being the quieter one in every room, the guy who always takes the hit to keep the peace. Sitting by the campfire the next evening, watching the last light hit the creek, Mason flipped a burger and said, "If she's this mad about us just camping, imagine how she'll act when you actually build a place here." He laughed. But my brain went click. What if that's exactly what I do? I said, not a tent, not a maybe someday, but a real cabin, a permanent place. Do it by the book, get every permit, and make it really truly mine. So I did. I walked into the county office with a rough sketch and came out with a list of inspections, fees, and requirements. I hired a small crew, Dave and Luis guys who did solid work and had built half the decks in that county. I kept every receipt, every email, every stamped approval. I was not going to give Lydia 1 inch of legal ground to stand on. The day the lumber truck pulled in, Lydia came storming down the street like sirens had gone off in her house. She had a thick stack of papers clutched to her chest. "You can't unload that here," she barked at the driver. "This land is not authorized for construction. The board has denied any new structures in the green corridor." The driver, this guy who'd clearly seen some things, held up his clipboard. "Ma'am, I've got an address, a paid order, and a signature. This is where it goes." She stepped right in front of him, then pivoted and slammed the top paper into my chest. It was something she had clearly typed herself with the title, "Community Cease and Desist Order," in Comic Sans, full of phrases like collective heritage rights and revoking permission to build, signed by her and 2 people I'd never heard of. I looked at it, then at her. "Lydia." "This is not a court document," I said. "This is a flyer. You can't just invent legal powers because you don't like my cabin." Her whole face went red. "Mock me all you want," she hissed. "But I have formed a preservation committee, and we will be inspecting this property and reporting every violation. You will not ruin what this community has built." The next morning, she showed up with the committee, 7 people in neon safety vests and lanyards that said Cedar Hollow Watch, carrying clipboards and binoculars. They walked around taking pictures of my fire ring, measuring distance from trees, gasping when Dave picked up a dead branch. One woman actually scribbled suspicious manipulation of forest floor on her form. It would have been hilarious if it wasn't my bank account and sanity on the line. Then came the lawyer. A lawyer. Guy in a slightly shiny suit carrying a briefcase walked up and introduced himself as Mark Elliott, representing a concerned local resident. He told me his client was preparing to file an injunction to halt my construction because of environmental and safety concerns. He handed me a folder that looked official at a glance, but inside was just a bunch of unfiled drafts, blurry photos of my campfire, a printout from Google about endangered moss, and another one of Lydia's hand-drawn heritage trail maps. "These aren't filed," I said. "There's no case number, no stamp, nothing." He cleared his throat. "We are prepared to pursue further legal action if you do not voluntarily suspend construction." "When you have an actual judge's name on something," I said, handing the folder back. "I'll read it. Until then, I'm building exactly what the county approved. You might want to double-check the permits before you invoice your client." The real turning point, though, was when the county sent out their own guy, a land use inspector named Ramirez, in response to Lydia's latest complaint that I was diverting waterways and destroying protected habitats. He walked the property with me, checked the setbacks, looked at the creek, went through my permits, page by page. After a while, he closed the folder, looked around, and said, "You're fine. You're actually one of the rare ones who does this completely by the book. HOA doesn't control this. You're under county code out here. We've got a stack of complaints from Ms. Barnes on all kinds of things. I'm going to mark this one as unfounded too. Do yourself a favor and keep documenting everything. People like that don't stop until they run into someone who won't move." For the first time in a long time, I felt what it was like to stand on solid ground, not just physically, but in my spine. I wasn't just a guy hoping not to get in trouble. I was a homeowner who had done everything right, and I had the receipts. Then came the day with the bulldozer. It was a clear morning cool, the kind where your coffee actually tastes better because you can see your breath. The cabin frame was up to knee height, floor joists, set porch area mapped out. Dave and Luis were joking about who was going to fall in love with the view first. Lydia had been strangely quiet for a day or two. No drive-bys, No pacing on the sidewalk, which honestly made me more nervous than seeing her. Around mid-morning, I heard an engine deeper and louder than any pickup. I walked around the cabin and looked up toward the ridge that separated my lot from the back of her property. Sitting there bright orange against the green was a bulldozer. Not some little skid steer, a real heavy machine. And climbing up into the seat, gripping the rail with this determined energy, was Lydia. For a second, my brain refused to process it, like no way, she isn't actually going to. Then the engine roared, and she turned the machine so the blade was pointed straight down the slope at my half-built cabin. "Lydia," I yelled, already running up the hill, heart hammering. "Stop. There are people down there. This isn't your land." She looked down at me, eyes wild, hair blowing, and shouted back over the engine. "If you won't stop, I will. This was our valley before you showed up. I will not let you ruin it." Then she shoved the lever forward. The bulldozer started crawling down the hill, picking up speed over uneven ground, chewing through dirt and rocks, heading straight for the porch posts. Dave and Luis dropped everything and sprinted away from the frame. Tyler grabbed Luis and yanked him back as the blade plowed through a stack of unused lumber boards, exploding to the sides. For a few long, slow-motion seconds, all I could hear was the engine and my own pulse. I remember thinking, she's actually going to do it. She is going to crush the cabin on land I own, because in her head, it belongs to her. Then, sirens close, the kind that make your bones vibrate. A sheriff's cruiser came flying around the bend onto the gravel tires, spitting rocks. Deputy Collins jumped out before the car even fully stopped. "Kill the engine, Lydia," he shouted. "Right now." She panicked, tried to hit the brake, hit the wrong lever, and the whole bulldozer lurched sideways, the blade gouging a deep trench a few feet in front of the porch line. For a second, it rocked so hard I thought it was going to roll, but it slammed back down and shuddered to a stop at this ugly angle. The engine idled loud and angry, and then Collins was up the side of the machine, reaching in to shut it off. When he helped her down, she wasn't the cool, composed HOA president from the polo shirt anymore. She was shaking, crying, half shouting. "They can't do this. This is my valley. My kids walked here. My husband and I." Like she'd finally said the quiet part out loud. This land was never legally hers, but she had built an entire identity around the idea that it was. Collins stepped back, voice flat. In that way cops get when the line has been crossed. "Ma'am, you just attempted to destroy private property with people standing in front of it. This isn't an HOA issue. This is criminal. You're lucky no one is in the hospital right now." Standing there, looking at the trench that could have been my front porch and my friends. If timing had been different, something in me hardened. I still had that small, sad part of me that could see the scared person under all that entitlement. But I also had eyes. She had just proved that if someone like her doesn't get checked, they will literally drive a bulldozer through you to protect the story in their head. There's a lot I could say about the aftermath, but I'll keep it tight. There was an incident report, photos, statements from me, from Dave and Luis, from Tyler, from Tom, who had watched half of it from his porch. Lydia was taken in for questioning, not in handcuffs on the spot like a movie, but she did not drive that bulldozer home. Let's put it that way. Word shot through Cedar Hollow Bluffs in about 12 minutes. A few days later, the HOA held an emergency meeting at the clubhouse. The room was full. Board members, neighbors who never came to meetings, people who'd had their own little run-ins with her over lawn heights and Christmas lights. I sat near the front next to Tom, with a neat stack of every violation notice, every fake resolution, every letter I'd gotten. Collins and a county rep were both there. Lydia came in late, sat at the back, eyes puffy, shoulders pulled in. They went through it point by point. The pattern of nuisance complaints, the use of HOA money to hire Mark and pay a deposit on the bulldozer, the fact that my permits were all in order and the county had cleared me. They played the body cam clip of the bulldozer incident, and hearing my own voice yelling and watching that blade scrape the dirt made my hands shake all over again. When they asked if I wanted to speak, I didn't give some big speech. I just told it like I'm telling you right now. I talked about being the quiet kid about buying this lot, because I wanted one place in my life where I wasn't at someone else's mercy about how she treated me like a criminal from the moment she saw my camper, how I did everything right, and she still decided her nostalgia was more important than my rights, how close we came to watching a cabin and maybe a person get flattened because she couldn't accept that a deed means something. And then I don't even know where it came from, but I looked right at her and said, I get that this place means a lot to you. I really do. But your memories don't make you the owner, and they don't give you the right to terrorize everybody who doesn't fit your story. The board went into a short, closed session, came back, and voted to remove her as HOA president, strip her of authority, and bar her from contacting me. It wasn't close. When they told her, she looked down at the table for a long time, then at me, eyes wet and furious, and lost all at once, and said, "You ruined everything." I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "No, Lydia. I finally stopped letting you ruin me. The cabin stands now. The trench from the bulldozer is filled in. The porch looks out over the creek the way I imagined it on that first quiet morning. The neighborhood feels lighter. People say hi more. Like they're not scared of being seen talking to the wrong person. Lydia still lives on the corner. I see her sometimes walking alone, no clipboard, no sunglasses. Part of me feels bad for her, for whatever empty space she was trying to fill by owning everything around her in her head. Another part of me knows that if no one had ever pushed back, she would have gotten worse, and one day it wouldn't have been just boards and dirt under that blade. So let me ask you, because this is where it always gets interesting in the comments, do you think I went too far by fighting her so hard, or not? Nearly far enough, considering she almost got people hurt. Do you feel any sympathy for someone who loses their place? When it was never actually theirs, on paper? Have you dealt with an HOA president? A boss, a neighbor who treated shared spaces like their personal kingdom? And what did you do about it? Did you back down to keep the peace? Or did you finally hit that point where you said, "Enough. I'm not moving this time. Tell me what you would have done if you were in my boots." On that hill, drop your thoughts, your stories, your arguments in the comments. And if you want more real stories about power entitlement and people who finally decide to stand their ground, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and let me know what kind of nightmare neighbor or HOA drama you want to hear next. Because as you can probably tell, there's no shortage of them.